I never thought moving to a planned community in Scottsdale, Arizona, would turn into a legal nightmare. But the moment I opened my mailbox and found that first violation notice, I knew my life was about to become infinitely more complicated. My name is Aaron Zimmerman, and I'm a 29-year-old veteran who served 2 tours in Afghanistan before a roadside bomb changed everything. The physical scars healed reasonably well, but the invisible wounds, the ones that wake you up at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat, those took longer to address. That's why I have Max, a 4-year-old German Shepherd who isn't just my pet but my lifeline. He's a fully trained service dog who alerts me to panic attacks before they spiral out of control, helps ground me during flashbacks, and performs specific tasks that allow me to function in daily life. I had bought my house in Desert Bloom Estates 6 months ago, a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home with a backyard that Max loved. The neighborhood seemed perfect at first. Quiet streets lined with palm trees, well-maintained common areas, and friendly neighbors who waved when I walked Max each morning. The HOA seemed like a minor inconvenience, just another set of rules to follow about trash placement and lawn care. I had no idea that the woman who ran it with an iron fist would become my worst enemy. The violation notice was printed on official Desert Bloom Estates letterhead, and it was remarkably direct. Violation: unauthorized pet exceeding weight restrictions. Per HOA Bylaws Section 7.3, no dogs over 35 pounds are permitted in Desert Bloom Estates. Your German Shepherd appears to exceed this limit. You have 14 days to remove the animal from the property or face daily fines of $100. I read it 3 times, my hands starting to shake. Max sensed my distress immediately and pressed his body against my legs, applying the deep pressure that helped calm my nervous system. I reached down and ran my fingers through his fur, trying to process what I was reading. This couldn't be legal. Service dogs were protected under federal law. The Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act were crystal clear about this. The next morning, I decided to handle this professionally. I printed out copies of Max's service dog certification, my medical documentation, and relevant sections of the Fair Housing Act. Then I drove to the HOA office, a small building near the community center that smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. The woman behind the desk looked up when I entered. Her nameplate read, Patricia Hendricks, HOA President. She was probably in her mid-50s, with bleached blonde hair styled in that helmet-like way that required half a can of hairspray to maintain. Her lips were pressed into a thin line that suggested smiling was something she did reluctantly and infrequently. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone already defensive. "Hi, I'm Aaron Zimmerman from 847 Seguero Drive. I received this violation notice about my dog, and I think there's been a misunderstanding." I placed the notice on her desk along with my documentation. Max is a service dog. He's protected under federal disability laws. Patricia barely glanced at the papers. "The HOA has rules, Mr. Zimmerman. No dogs over 35 pounds. It's in the bylaws that you agreed to when you purchased your home." "Yes, but federal law supersedes HOA bylaws," I explained, keeping my voice calm. "The Fair Housing Act requires reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities. Service animals are specifically protected regardless of breed or size restrictions." She picked up one of the documents, scanned it for maybe 5 seconds, then set it back down. "This looks like something you printed off the internet. Anyone can claim their pet is a service animal these days. I see people at the grocery store with dogs in purses claiming they are service animals. It's gotten completely out of hand." My jaw clenched. Max is a legitimate service dog. I'm a disabled veteran. He's trained to perform specific tasks related to my disability. This isn't a pet, and this isn't negotiable under federal law. Well, Mr. Zimmerman, this is a private community with rules that all homeowners agreed to follow. If we make exceptions for everyone who wants one, the whole system falls apart. She straightened the papers on her desk, a clear dismissal. You have 14 days. If the animal isn't removed, the fines begin. I left that office feeling my heart race in that familiar, dangerous way. Max was waiting in the car with the windows cracked and the air conditioning running. When I got in, he immediately placed his paw on my arm, his dark eyes locked on mine. I focused on my breathing, counting like my therapist taught me, and felt the panic recede slightly. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. Her name was Jennifer Martinez, and she specialized in disability rights and housing discrimination. I explained the situation during our consultation, and I heard her sigh deeply. Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think, Jennifer said. HOAs can be incredibly stubborn about this, even when the law is clear. Here's what we're going to do. I'll draft a formal letter explaining your rights under the FHA and ADA, along with your documentation. We'll send it certified mail so there's a record. If they continue to pursue this, we can file a complaint with HUD and potentially sue for damages. How long does this usually take? I asked. It depends on how reasonable they are. Some HOAs back down immediately once they understand the legal implications. Others dig in, and it becomes a protracted fight. Be prepared for either scenario. Jennifer's letter went out 3 days later. It was 5 pages of legal language that essentially said what I had already told Patricia, but in much more official terms. It included case citations, federal statutes, and a clear warning about the consequences of violating federal disability laws. I felt a small surge of hope when I mailed it. Surely, faced with this level of documentation and legal expertise, they would back down. I was wrong. A week later, I received another notice. This one claimed that Max had been observed running loose in the neighborhood, another violation. This was completely false. Max was never off leash except in my fenced backyard. He was trained to stay by my side, and I was meticulous about following leash laws. I knew exactly what this was, retaliation. I called Jennifer immediately. They're escalating. This is a false complaint. Max is never off leash in public. Document everything, she advised. Keep a log of every time you walk Max. Take photos showing him leashed. Get statements from neighbors if possible. They're building a paper trail to justify their actions, so we need to build a better one. I started carrying my phone everywhere, taking time-stamped photos of our walks, recording the times and routes. My next-door neighbor, Tom, an older man who'd been friendly since I moved in, noticed my new routine. Having trouble with the HOA, he asked one morning while watering his roses. You could say that. They're trying to force me to get rid of my service dog. Tom shook his head. Patricia Hendricks is a piece of work. She forced the Johnsons to repaint their entire house because the beige was half a shade off from the approved color palette. Cost them thousands. Most of us are too afraid to push back because she'll make your life miserable. Well, she picked the wrong person this time. Federal law is on my side. Good for you, son. Let me know if you need anything. I've seen that dog of yours. He's calmer and better behaved than half the people in this neighborhood. Tom's support meant more than he probably realized. Over the next week, I collected statements from 3 other neighbors, all confirming that Max was always leashed and well behaved. I felt like I was building a solid case, but the stress was taking its toll. I wasn't sleeping well, and my anxiety levels were elevated. Max was working overtime, alerting me multiple times a day to help me manage my symptoms. Then came the 14-day deadline. I woke up that morning with a knot in my stomach. I knew the fines were supposed to start, but I hadn't removed Max, and I wasn't going to. Jennifer had assured me that the fines were legally unenforceable given the circumstances, but seeing them pile up was still stressful. Sure enough, another notice appeared, this time hand-delivered and taped to my front door. Final warning: unauthorized animal remains on property. Fines of $100 per day begin immediately. Total fine balance will be added to your HOA dues and may result in a lien against your property if unpaid. The threat of a lien made my blood run cold. I had worked so hard to buy this house, using my VA loan and every penny I'd saved. The thought of losing it because of this petty tyrant was infuriating. I scheduled an emergency call with Jennifer. They're threatening a lien. Can they actually do that? Not legally, not in this situation, but they can try, and then we'd have to fight it in court. Aaron, I think it's time we file a formal complaint with HUD and consider a lawsuit. This has gone beyond a simple misunderstanding. They're engaging in a pattern of harassment and discrimination. Do it. I'm not backing down. Jennifer filed the HUD complaint that week, and we began preparing a lawsuit. The complaint alleged violations of the Fair Housing Act, disability discrimination, and harassment. It detailed every interaction, every false violation notice, and Patricia's refusal to provide reasonable accommodation despite clear legal requirements. But Patricia Hendricks wasn't done. 2 weeks after the HUD complaint was filed, I received a notice about an emergency HOA meeting to discuss my ongoing violations and disregard for community standards. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening at the community center. They're going to try to publicly shame you, Jennifer warned. HOA meetings can get ugly. You have the right to attend and defend yourself, but be prepared for hostility. I've faced worse than a room full of angry homeowners, I said, though my stomach disagreed. Thursday evening arrived too quickly. I walked into the community center with Max at my side, his service dog vest clearly visible. The room was set up with rows of chairs facing a table where Patricia sat with 4 other board members. About 30 residents were scattered throughout the seats, their conversations dying down as I entered. Patricia's expression hardened when she saw Max. "Mr. Zimmerman, animals aren't permitted in the community center. Service dogs are permitted everywhere their handlers are permitted under the ADA," I replied calmly, taking a seat in the front row. "Max is a working service dog, not a pet." She pursed her lips but didn't push the issue, probably aware that everyone was watching. The meeting started with typical HOA business: approval of minutes, discussion of landscaping budgets, a debate about pool hours. I sat through 45 minutes of mind-numbing bureaucracy before Patricia finally addressed what everyone knew was the real reason for the meeting. Item 7 on the agenda: discussion of ongoing violations at 847 Seguero Drive. Patricia shuffled her papers dramatically. "Mr. Zimmerman has repeatedly violated our pet policy by keeping an oversized dog on the property. He's refused to comply with violation notices and has now accumulated over $2,000 in fines." A woman in the third row raised her hand. "Isn't his dog a service dog? I thought those were protected." "Anyone can buy a vest online and claim their pet is a service dog," Patricia said dismissively. "The HOA has a responsibility to all residents to enforce the rules fairly. If we allow one person to break the rules, it opens the door for everyone to do so. I raised my hand. May I respond? Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but several residents were nodding, so she had little choice. Briefly, I stood, and Max stood with me, calm and professional. Max isn't a pet. He's a trained service dog who performs specific tasks related to my disability. I'm a disabled veteran with PTSD. Max alerts me to panic attacks, helps ground me during flashbacks, and performs other trained tasks that are protected health information. Under the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, service animals are specifically exempt from pet restrictions, regardless of breed or size. HOA bylaws don't supersede federal law. I held up the folder Jennifer had prepared. I've provided extensive documentation, including training certifications, medical records, and legal citations. The HOA has refused to even review this documentation properly. Instead, I've been subjected to harassment, false violation notices, and now threats of a lien against my property. I've filed a complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I'm prepared to file a federal lawsuit if necessary. The room was silent. Several residents were nodding, others whispering to each other. Patricia's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "This is not the venue for legal debates," she said sharply. "The board will take your comments under advisement. However, the rules are clear, and the board has a fiduciary duty to enforce them. The fines stand." An older man in the back stood up. "Patricia, if federal law says he can have the dog, then we can't fine him for it. The HOA could be liable." "The board has consulted with our attorney," Patricia lied smoothly. I knew she was lying because Jennifer had already checked. The HOA hadn't consulted any attorney. "We're well within our rights." The meeting devolved into arguments after that, residents debating back and forth about rules versus laws, property values versus individual rights. I sat through another 30 minutes before the meeting finally adjourned with no resolution. Patricia announced that the board would take the matter under further consideration, which I knew meant she was going to keep doing exactly what she'd been doing. As people filed out, several residents approached me. Tom from next door clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good, son." Patricia runs this place like her personal fiefdom. It's about time someone stood up to her. A younger woman introduced herself as Sarah Chen. "I have a friend with a service dog. What Patricia is doing is illegal and wrong. If you need witnesses or statements, let me know." By the time I left, I had contact information for 7 residents willing to support my case. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small victory in a war I seemed to be losing on paper. The next week, Jennifer called with news. HUD has opened an investigation. "They're taking your complaint seriously. They'll be contacting the HOA for their response and documentation." "This is good, Aaron. Federal agencies don't investigate unless they see merit in the complaint." "How long does the investigation take?" "Could be months." But here's the thing. Once an HOA knows they're under federal investigation, they often change their tune quickly. The potential penalties for violating the Fair Housing Act are significant. I allowed myself to feel hopeful. Maybe this would finally be over. I should have known better. 3 days later, I came home from a therapy appointment to find animal control at my house. A truck was parked in my driveway, and an officer was peering into my backyard where Max was relaxing in the shade. "Can I help you?" I asked, my heart racing. The officer turned, looking relieved to see me. "Are you the homeowner? I received a complaint about an aggressive dog at this address." "A complaint from who?" He checked his paperwork. "Anonymous call. Said there was a large dog acting aggressively, possibly dangerous." I felt my hands ball into fists. That's completely false. Max is a service dog. He's never aggressive. This is harassment from my HOA. The officer studied me, then looked back at Max, who was now sitting calmly by the back door, watching us with mild interest. He doesn't look aggressive. Can I see his vaccination records and your service dog documentation? I brought everything out, my hands shaking with anger. The officer reviewed it all carefully, then sighed. Look, between you and me, I get calls like this sometimes. Neighbors trying to use us to settle disputes. Your dog is clearly well-trained and legal. I'll file a report saying no violation found, but you might want to get a camera system. Document everything. If someone's making false reports, you need evidence. Thank you. I appreciate you being reasonable. After he left, I sat on my front steps with Max beside me, feeling exhausted. The constant stress was wearing me down. Every day brought a new attack, a new false complaint, a new attempt to force me out or make me give up Max. I knew Patricia was behind all of it, but proving it was harder. I took the animal control officer's advice and installed security cameras that weekend. 2 covering my front yard, 2 for the back, and 1 for the driveway. It cost me $800 I hadn't planned to spend, but I needed protection. The cameras were motion-activated and uploaded footage to the cloud automatically. The investment paid off faster than I expected. 2 nights later, at almost midnight, my camera alerts went off. I checked my phone and saw a figure in a hoodie walking up my driveway, approaching my front door. My heart pounded as I watched them tape something to the door, then hurry away. The motion-activated floodlight I'd installed caught them clearly for a moment, a woman with blonde hair, before she rushed out of frame. I went to the door and found another violation notice, this one claiming Max had been barking excessively and disturbing neighbors. The timestamp on the notice said it was filed at 5 in the afternoon, but my cameras showed Max and I hadn't even been home at that time. We'd been at the VA hospital for my monthly appointment. The next morning, I sent the camera footage to Jennifer. We've got her. This proves the complaints are false and that she's personally delivering them at midnight to harass me. Jennifer sounded excited when she called back. This is excellent evidence. It shows bad faith harassment and proves the complaints are fabricated. I'm going to amend our HUD complaint to include this. We're also ready to file the lawsuit. I think we have more than enough. File it. I'm done playing defense. The lawsuit was filed in federal district court the following week. Zimmerman v. Desert Bloom Estates Homeowners Association and Patricia Hendricks, individually. It alleged violations of the Fair Housing Act, disability discrimination, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and sought compensatory and punitive damages plus attorney fees. Patricia was served with the lawsuit at the HOA office. According to the process server, she turned white as a sheet when she read it. Good. For about a week, things were quiet. No violation notices, no complaints, no midnight visits. I dared to hope that maybe the lawsuit had scared them straight, but I underestimated Patricia's vindictiveness. The next HOA board meeting included a vote on a special assessment for all homeowners to cover increased legal costs and community improvements. Every homeowner would be charged $5,000. When I read the notice, I knew exactly what it was. Punishment directed at me but spread across the entire community to turn my neighbors against me. The tactic backfired spectacularly. Within 24 hours, I had angry calls and emails from a dozen residents demanding to know if this was related to my lawsuit. Tom from next door was furious. "This is ridiculous, Aaron. Everyone knows Patricia is using HOA funds to fight you instead of just following the law. A bunch of us are talking about removing her from the board. Can you do that? According to the bylaws, we can call for a special election if we get signatures from 20% of homeowners. We're already halfway there. I contacted Jennifer with this information. She was thrilled. This is perfect. It shows the HOA is retaliating not just against you, but against other residents for supporting you. It strengthens our case significantly. Plus, if they remove Patricia from the board, it might finally bring some sanity to the situation. The petition for a special election gathered signatures quickly. Out of 140 homes in Desert Bloom Estates, they needed 28 signatures. They got 52 in less than a week. The special election was scheduled for 6 weeks out, according to the bylaws. Patricia didn't take this well. She sent out a newsletter to all residents claiming that a small group of troublemakers are trying to destabilize the community over petty grievances. She listed all the work she'd done as HOA president, the landscaping improvements, the community events, the protection of property values through diligent enforcement of standards. It might have worked if she hadn't overplayed her hand. At the bottom of the newsletter, she included a thinly veiled attack on me, mentioning residents who think they are above the rules and the dangers of large, aggressive animals in a family community. Sarah Chen, the woman who'd approached me after that first HOA meeting, forwarded me the newsletter with a disgusted message. She's not even pretending this isn't about you anymore. My cousin is a reporter for the Phoenix Tribune. Would you be willing to talk to him? This is newsworthy. HOA harassment of a disabled veteran. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep this private, fight it in court and move on. But another part of me thought about all the other people, disabled veterans, people with service dogs, anyone who didn't fit Patricia's narrow vision of what a neighbor should be, who might face similar treatment. If going public could prevent that, maybe it was worth it. I talked to Jennifer first. Will it hurt our case? Actually, it might help. Public pressure can be powerful. Just stick to the facts, be sympathetic, and don't say anything that could be construed as defamatory. I'll be there with you. The interview happened at my house 3 days later. David Chen was in his early 30s, professional, and clearly appalled when I walked him through everything. He took photos of the violation notices, reviewed the camera footage I was willing to share, and interviewed Tom and 2 other neighbors willing to go on record. The story ran on the front page of the local section 3 days later. Scottsdale HOA accused of harassing disabled veteran over service dog. It was fair and factual, laying out the timeline of events, the legal issues, and including my perspective alongside the HOA's official no-comment response. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The story was picked up by local TV stations. I did 2 more interviews, one with a Phoenix ABC affiliate and one with a local veteran advocacy group's podcast. Each time, I kept the message simple. Service dogs are protected under federal law. HOAs don't get to override disability rights, and what was happening to me could happen to anyone. My phone started ringing with calls from other people who'd had similar experiences. A woman in Temp whose HOA tried to ban her son's autism service dog. A veteran in Mesa fighting his HOA over a PTSD service dog. A blind woman in Chandler whose HOA claimed her guide dog was a liability. I gave them all Jennifer's contact information and the names of other disability rights attorneys. The publicity put immense pressure on the Desert Bloom Estates HOA. The board members who weren't Patricia started distancing themselves. 2 of them resigned, claiming personal reasons. The special election became even more charged, with multiple people announcing campaigns to replace not just Patricia but the entire board. Through all of this, Max remained my constant companion. He didn't know about lawsuits or media coverage or HOA politics. He just knew I needed him, and he was there, alerting me when my stress levels spiked, grounding me during panic attacks, ensuring I could function day to day. Looking at him sometimes, so calm and professional, I felt a surge of protective anger. This dog had saved my life in ways I couldn't fully articulate, and some petty tyrant thought she had the right to take him away. The HUD investigation continued in the background. An investigator came to interview me, spent 2 hours going through every document, every email, every violation notice. She was professional and gave nothing away, but I could tell she wasn't impressed with the HOA's actions. "We take these cases seriously," she said as she was leaving. "The Fair Housing Act exists for a reason. Disability discrimination, especially against veterans, is something we prioritize." 2 weeks before the special election, the HOA's attorney finally contacted Jennifer. He wanted to discuss a settlement. "They're getting nervous," Jennifer explained. "Between the lawsuit, the HUD investigation, and the media coverage, they're realizing how badly they've screwed up. Let's hear what they're offering, but don't get your hopes up. First offers are usually lowball." The offer was insulting. The HOA would drop all fines and violation notices if I agreed to drop the lawsuit and the HUD complaint. No admission of wrongdoing, no damages, no attorney fees, just walking away. "Tell them no," I said immediately. "This isn't about money, but they broke federal law. They harassed me for months. Other people need to see there are consequences for this behavior." Jennifer smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. Let me counter." The counter proposal was substantial. Admission of wrongdoing, written apology, payment of $50,000 in compensatory damages, payment of all attorney fees, mandatory fair housing training for all board members, and policy changes to ensure compliance with federal disability laws. Plus, I kept my house and Max, obviously. The HOA attorney said he'd present it to the board. 3 days later, he called back. They'd accepted everything except the damages. They'd go to $30,000. "Take it," Jennifer advised. $30,000 plus attorney fees, which are already over $20,000, is a significant settlement. And more importantly, you get the policy changes and the admission of wrongdoing. That's the part that helps other people. I thought about it for a day, then agreed. The settlement was finalized a week before the special election. As part of the agreement, the HOA sent a letter to all residents explaining that they had reviewed their policies regarding service animals and would be implementing changes to ensure full compliance with federal disability laws. It didn't explicitly say they'd been wrong, but everyone knew what it meant. The special election still happened. Patricia Hendricks and the remaining board members all lost their seats. The new board president was Mark Sullivan, a retired schoolteacher who'd been vocal about Patricia's overreach. One of his first acts was to issue a formal apology to me, on the record at a public HOA meeting. "The previous board's treatment of Mr. Zimmerman was unacceptable and illegal," Mark said, reading from a prepared statement. "This community should be welcoming to all residents, including those with disabilities who rely on service animals. We're committed to ensuring this never happens again." The HUD investigation concluded 2 months later. They found that Desert Bloom Estates, HOA, had violated the Fair Housing Act and issued a formal determination in my favor. The penalties were significant: additional fines and mandatory compliance monitoring for 3 years. Patricia Hendricks, named individually in the HUD complaint, was personally fined as well. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved out of Desert Bloom Estates shortly after, unable to face the community that had rejected her so thoroughly. I didn't feel particularly triumphant about that. I hadn't wanted to destroy her life. I just wanted to keep my service dog and live in peace. Life slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. My neighbors were friendlier, some apologizing for not speaking up sooner, others just going out of their way to be kind. Tom still watered his roses every morning and chatted with me about sports and weather. Sarah Chen became a good friend, often bringing her kids over to play in my yard, where Max tolerated their attention with patient dignity. The settlement money went into savings, a cushion against future emergencies. The legal victory felt more important than the financial one. Jennifer told me that she'd already had 3 new clients reference my case when they contacted her about similar situations. The Phoenix Tribune story had been syndicated to other Arizona papers and shared widely on social media. HOAs across the state were suddenly much more careful about how they handled service animal requests. I still had bad days. PTSD doesn't just go away because you win a lawsuit. But Max was always there, alerting me before panic attacks fully formed, applying pressure during flashbacks, performing the dozen small tasks that helped me function. Some mornings I woke up and just buried my face in his fur, grateful for his presence and terrified at how close I'd come to losing him. About 6 months after the settlement, I was contacted by a veteran advocacy organization. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to speak at events about disability rights and service dogs. I hesitated at first, not sure I wanted to relive the whole ordeal repeatedly. But then I thought about all those calls I'd gotten, all those people fighting similar battles, and I agreed. The first speaking engagement was at a veteran community center in Phoenix. About 50 people showed up, many with their own service dogs. I told my story, walked them through what had happened, and explained the legal protections available. Afterward, people lined up to thank me, some with tears in their eyes, sharing their own experiences of discrimination and harassment. An older veteran, probably in his 70s, shook my hand with a grip that was still strong despite his age. "Thank you, son. My HOA has been giving me grief about my dog. I didn't know I had any rights. Now I know I can fight back." That moment crystallized everything for me. The months of stress, the legal bills, the sleepless nights, all of it was worth it if it helped even one other person. I kept doing the speaking engagements, maybe once a month. I also worked with Jennifer and the advocacy organization to create a guide for people dealing with HOA issues related to service animals. It outlined federal protections, explained how to document discrimination, and provided template letters to send to HOAs. We made it available for free online, and it was downloaded thousands of times in the first month. The new Desert Bloom Estates HOA board proved to be dramatically different from Patricia's regime. They focused on actual community improvements rather than petty enforcement of arbitrary rules. The special assessment Patricia had threatened was canceled. Paint color rules were relaxed. The pool hours were extended. People seemed happier, more willing to engage with their neighbors without fear of violation notices for trivial matters. Mark Sullivan, the new board president, approached me one day while I was walking Max. "Aaron, I wanted to thank you. What you did, standing up to Patricia, it changed this community for the better. A lot of us had issues with how she ran things but felt powerless to challenge her. You showed us it was possible." "I just wanted to keep my dog," I said, though I appreciated the sentiment. "It was more than that. You stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. That matters." About a year after the settlement, I was contacted by a producer from a national news program. They were doing a segment on HOA overreach and wanted to feature my story. I almost said no, feeling like I'd moved past it and didn't want to rehash everything again. But Jennifer convinced me. The more people who know about these issues, the fewer people who'll face what you faced. National exposure means national impact. The segment aired during prime time, a 10-minute piece that covered my case along with two others. It sparked a wider conversation about HOA power and the need for oversight. Several state legislatures, including Arizona's, began considering bills to provide more protections for homeowners and clearer guidelines for HOAs regarding disability accommodations. I testified before the Arizona State Legislature when they held hearings on one such bill. Sitting at that table with Max beside me, facing a room full of legislators and cameras, I felt the same nervousness I'd felt at that first confrontation with Patricia. But I'd learned that doing the right thing often means being uncomfortable. Service dogs aren't pets, I told the committee. They're medical equipment, as essential to people with disabilities as wheelchairs or oxygen tanks. No one would tolerate an HOA banning wheelchairs. Service dogs deserve the same protection and respect. The law is already clear on this, but stronger state-level protections would help ensure people don't have to fight federal lawsuits just to live in peace with their service animals. The bill passed 6 months later. It included provisions requiring HOAs to have formal policies for handling service animal accommodations, mandatory fair housing training for HOA board members, and stronger penalties for violations. The governor signed it with me and Max present, a photo op that made the local papers. Through all of this, life went on. I continued my therapy, managed my PTSD, worked on my recovery. I'd started doing some consulting work for veteran organizations, using my business degree and my lived experience to help improve programs and services. It gave me purpose and flexibility, allowing me to work around my disability while still contributing something meaningful. Max turned 5, still energetic and devoted, though I could see tiny touches of gray starting around his muzzle. We'd been partners for 3 years now, and I couldn't imagine life without him. Every morning we walked the neighborhood, and every morning I was reminded of how close I'd come to losing him. The anniversary of the settlement passed without much fanfare. I thought about sending Patricia a card, something petty and vindictive, but decided against it. She'd lost her position, her reputation, and paid significant fines. That was consequence enough. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to keep moving forward. One Saturday morning, about 18 months after everything ended, I was in my backyard with Max when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a young couple, probably late 20s, looking nervous. "Hi, are you Aaron Zimmerman?" the woman asked. She had a small dog with her, some kind of terrier mix wearing a service dog vest. "I am. Can I help you? We just moved into the neighborhood. We read about what happened with your HOA and we wanted to introduce ourselves. I'm Michelle, this is my husband David, and this is Pepper. She's my psychiatric service dog." My chest tightened, not with anxiety but with something warmer. "Welcome to the neighborhood. You won't have any problems with the HOA, I promise. Come in. Let me give you some contact information just in case, but the current board is great about following the law." We sat in my living room, Max and Pepper carefully ignoring each other in that way well-trained service dogs do, and I answered their questions. They'd been nervous about moving into an HOA community because of horror stories they'd heard. Finding out I lived here, that there was someone who understood and had already fought these battles, clearly relieved them enormously. After they left, I stood in my doorway watching them walk back to their house 2 streets over, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Genuine peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the knowledge that the struggle had meant something. that it had made things better not just for me but for others. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer, Max lying at my feet in the fading desert sunlight. I thought about the last 2 years, the stress and fear and anger, but also the allies I'd found, the changes I'd helped create, the people I'd been able to help. I thought about Patricia and wondered if she'd learned anything, if she understood now that rules without compassion are just tools of oppression. I doubted it, but it didn't matter anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Just got a call from another vet with an HOA service dog issue. Gave him your number for peer support. Hope that's okay. I texted back immediately. Of course. Happy to help. And I was, because that's what all of this had taught me, that fighting for what's right isn't just about winning your own battle. It's about making the path easier for those who come after you. It's about standing up when standing up is hard because someone has to. It's about understanding that the law exists to protect the vulnerable, and when people violate those protections, there have to be consequences. Max stirred, lifting his head to look at me with those intelligent brown eyes. I reached down and scratched behind his ears. We did good, buddy. We did real good. He made a contented sound and settled back down. In his world, it was simple. He had a job to do and he did it. The complications, the legal battles, the media coverage, none of that mattered to him. He just knew I needed him and he was there. The sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the neighborhood, kids were playing and I could hear laughter. The community pool was open, and the sound of splashing carried on the evening breeze. This was what Patricia had claimed to be protecting with her rigid enforcement of arbitrary rules, community, property values standards. But she'd missed the entire point. A real community isn't about uniformity. It's not about everyone having the same color house or the same size dog or the same lifestyle. A real community is about people looking out for each other, accepting differences, making space for everyone to belong. It's about understanding that sometimes accommodating someone else's needs isn't a burden. It's basic human decency. I'd bought this house seeking safety and stability, a place to rebuild my life after the chaos of war and the long struggle with PTSD. Instead, I'd found another battle, one I never wanted but couldn't avoid, and in fighting it, I discovered something important. I was stronger than I thought. With Max at my side and good people supporting me, I could stand up to injustice. I could win. The legal settlement had included a provision that the HOA could never implement any policies that discriminated based on disability. It had to maintain a formal process for reasonable accommodation requests. Board members had to complete fair housing training annually. These weren't just requirements for my benefit. They protected every current and future resident who might need accommodations, whether for service animals, accessible parking, or any other disability-related need. As darkness settled over Desert Bloom Estates, I headed inside. Max followed, his nails clicking on the hardwood floor. I prepared his dinner, then made my own, a simple pasta dish that didn't require much thought. We ate together, him from his bowl on the floor, me at the kitchen counter, comfortable in our routine. Before bed, I did one last check of email and saw a message from the State Veterans Affairs Office. They wanted to feature my case in their quarterly newsletter as an example of successful disability rights advocacy. I agreed and added it to my calendar to write something up for them next week. Lying in bed that night, Max on his dog bed next to mine where he could reach me if I had nightmares, I thought about how different my life was from 2 years ago. Then, I'd been naive enough to think that HOA rules were just about trash cans and paint colors. Now, I understood the darker side of these organizations, How unchecked power and rigid thinking could turn neighbors into adversaries and make someone's home feel like hostile territory. But I also understood something more hopeful. That laws exist to protect people like me, that standing up for your rights can create change, and that most people, when they understand what's really at stake, will do the right thing. The residents of Desert Bloom Estates hadn't supported Patricia once they understood she was discriminating against a disabled veteran. They'd risen up and removed her. That faith in basic human decency, battered as it had been during the worst of the conflict, had ultimately been restored. Sleep came easier these days. Max's presence helped, of course, but so did the sense of closure. The legal battle was over. The settlement was finalized. The policy changes were implemented. I'd done everything I could to ensure this didn't happen to someone else. Now I could focus on healing, on building the life I'd moved here to find. Morning came with Arizona sunshine streaming through my bedroom window. Max was already awake, watching me with that alert intelligence that never failed to amaze me. Time for our morning walk, our routine that had been threatened but survived. We stepped outside into another perfect desert morning. Tom was already watering his roses. Morning, Aaron. Morning, Max. Morning, Tom. Life was good, not perfect. Never perfect for someone managing PTSD, but good. I had my home, my service dog, my community, and my peace. I'd fought for all of it and won. Whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. Max and I, we were a team, partners in navigating a world that wasn't always kind to people like me. And if another HOA, another Patricia Hendricks, another petty tyrant tried to take that away, well, I knew now exactly how to fight back. The law was on my side. Justice was on my side. And that, ultimately, was what mattered most. The story could have ended in defeat, with me losing my home or giving up Max. It could have ended with Patricia winning through sheer stubborn refusal to acknowledge federal law. But it didn't. It ended with accountability, with change, with a better community for everyone. It ended with a disabled veteran keeping his service dog and helping pave the way for others to do the same. Sometimes the good guys win. Sometimes standing up to bullies works. Sometimes the system, slow and frustrating as it is, delivers justice. This was one of those times, and I was grateful for it every single day.